Hi, everybody, and welcome to the NDSC podcast, a place to share ideas for future and new management doctoral students. I am your host, Jose, and I have prepared for you a couple of episodes we recorded at the 2022 Academy of Management annual meeting, live from Seattle. In this series of episodes, you'll hear from faculty and students. They all provide some great advice that I think will be super helpful for your PhD journey. I hope you enjoyed these conversations as much as I enjoyed recording them. Thanks for hearing us and welcome again. My next guest is Professor Bryan Edwards at Oklahoma State University Spears School of Business. He's also the Ph.D. coordinator for the Management Ph.D. program at the same school. What I like to do is usually with interviews to professors, academics, is always about the research, their experience as academics, but maybe if you want to share a little bit of who you are outside of academia, maybe hobbies, maybe something you like to do in your spare time that has nothing to do with research or teaching, right?
Yeah. Sure. And thank you for having me on this podcast, Jose. I'm happy to be here. So I've been married for 20 years to Claire Beaudoin Edwards, and she's from New Orleans. I'm from South Alabama. We met at Texas A&M University. So we have three beautiful children, a 16-year-old daughter, 15-year-old son. They're involved in tennis, baseball, football. Another 10-year-old son who's involved in golf and football. And so for the last 3 or 4 years, my hobbies outside of academia have just been their activities, tennis tournaments, baseball tournaments. But it's been great. So we travel all over the country. We go to Kansas and Oklahoma and Missouri and Texas and for a lot of these tournaments. So that's been a lot of fun. And when I do take some time for myself, I do a lot of cycling. Out in Oklahoma, near Stillwater, there are tons of gravel roads, miles and miles of gravel roads, and so I do gravel biking, and so it's a little special bikes in between a mountain bike and a road bike, but it's a little safer out there on those gravel roads because you don't have all the traffic, and when there is traffic, it's a lot slower. So I enjoy doing that. I run, do road races, 10Ks, half marathons, and then most of my hobbies are outdoors, so things like hiking, camping, hunting, fishing. You name it.
How do you think, and now I'm going into your role as an academic, as a professor, kind of like how is the balance with your family, right? Before I go to the kind of like our structure questions that we have for everybody, how kind of like you're able to manage or you approach that family life balance and your work?
That's an excellent question because like any other job, that's important. And it's a challenge, but I'm lucky enough to have a wife who is very helpful, and she works 3 days a week, and then I am lucky to have a job that is very flexible where if I need to take off at noon and drive a kid to Wichita, Kansas for a tournament, I can do so, and then just make up the hours at another time, either nights, weekends, whatever. So I take advantage of this job as an academic and the flexible hours to meet that. And when it comes to balance, for me at least, family comes first, number one. So if I have to cancel a work meeting to support one of my kids' activities, I do so, and usually you can work around it, and everybody understands. We have in our department, we have a lot of faculty with kids, and they're all in the same boat, and so we sometimes help each other out as well. Picking up kids from school so that someone can go to a meeting. So I think this job, as much as any other job, allows you to strike a balance between work and family life. Yeah.
So Bryan, tell me a little bit about what brought you to this career, like why you decided to do a PhD, why a management PhD, why you decided on being OB, and then why being a professor and academic?
It's a good question. My father had a PhD in clinical psychology.
Okay.
So like a lot of kids where you don't really know what you want to do at the age of 19 or 20, I just kind of I enjoyed seeing what he did and kind of followed in his footsteps. But then when I got into psychology major at the University of Alabama, I realized I don't know that I've got what it takes to be a clinician. or that I would enjoy it very much. And that takes a very special personality type. But I still had a passion for psychology. So one of my professors pulled me aside and suggested I take a look at IO Psych. We didn't have an IO Psych program at the University of Alabama, but when I did, there were a lot of resources out there that PsyOp provided. And then I looked at Academy Management, HR, and OB. I realized that's kind of really what I want to do. And so I applied to IO Psych programs, and I've been doing it ever since.
Nice.
Okay.
What is your favorite or most fulfilling thing about your career, about your work?
The most fulfilling thing, well, it has to be mentoring students.
Okay.
I love the research, and I love the high you get when you finally get something published. But it's mentoring the students and seeing the high that they have when they finally get something published. I think that's the most. And I love the undergraduates, but my passion are really with the Ph.D. students. And so what's fulfilling is mentoring them for their Ph.D., teaching the Ph.D. For their dissertation, teaching the Ph.D. classes, and I've done a lot. I've probably mentored close to 100 Ph.D. students now, with about 25 committees that I've chaired, and then the rest I've been on the committee, and so
that's impressive.
I've got to work.
And so the other side of the coin, right? What's the most challenging thing about your work?
I think the most challenging thing dovetails with the biggest advantage to our job, because our job is more entrepreneurial. I get to manage my own time, what I research, who I work with, the hours that I work, but at the same time, I don't have anyone else directing what I'm doing, and so it's me that, designing or working, and making commitments, and it's so easy to overcommit. And then what happens is you wind up letting down some of your co-authors or project co-PIs because you simply can't get done everything you need to. So that's the biggest challenge, is time management and learning to say no. And for somebody who's a high in agreeableness like me, it's really difficult to say no. I don't want to let anyone down up front, but it's important to do so when I know I've already committed to some other things, and it even means turning down some really cool projects just simply because I've already committed to others, and I want to fulfill those commitments.
So I'm going to go off script, and I was thinking on your previous response of mentoring students, in particular PhD students, and kind of like your experience there. So what would you say, because I think this is going to be very relevant to all the students that hear us, from all the committees you've chaired, from the students you've worked with, what are some of the characteristics that you feel that make a successful PhD student? And I know success can have many faces, but you see a student that is happy with his or her results, is achieving her or his goals. What do you think are some of the key characteristics you see in them?
I think the number one characteristic is impulse control. You have to be able to give long periods of sustained attention on your dissertation or on your classwork, even when it's not all that interesting. And so people who have trouble with impulse control, they have trouble focusing on a task that they don't find to be very interesting to them. And I know your dissertation, you should have a passion for your dissertation. I'm not saying it's not interesting, but it can be tedious to sit down and work on it for 3 hours, 4 hours straight. So and I think for those students who are ABD versus those who finish, the difference could very well be impulse control. It's really hard for them to stay on task. So I think that's the number one characteristic. And then it always helps to kind of take the mindset that this is an apprenticeship model. So pay attention to your professors and pay attention to the older graduate students and really learn from them and do what they say, because they've been through it. They it's not like we are trying to stamp out the academic freedom of a PhD student, but if you can follow along and follow instructions from them to a T, then once you've graduated and you're well trained and you're on your own, then you get some flexibility in terms of what you want to study and how you want to go about doing things. So
nice. So those are really good advice for anybody that will hear this. What's the best advice you've received, maybe as a PhD student or even now later in your career as a professor? What's the best advice that you've received?
The best advice is from my Ph.D. advisor, Dr. Winfred Arthur Jr., who he kept preaching, wear them down. That was a phrase he used to say, is wear them down. And what he meant was just persistence, because this field is full of failures. I mean, you're constantly having things rejected, grant proposals, manuscripts, whatever it is. And so it can get disappointing, but if every manuscript has a home, and one of the things he used to say is, he never lets go of a project, so he always publishes it. Even if it gets rejected by the first 2 or 3 journals, there's always a home for it, because you've already spent an enormous amount of hours in conducting your research. So dropping it because of the disappointments and you thinking, I'll never get this thing published, you will, and you've already put in the work. So that persistence I've taken to heart. I heard Dr. Mike Campion one time say that he just worked every single day on a project, just a little bit every day, devoted every time. And then once he got towards the end, he would go bulldog on it. It was a term he used, where he just set aside everything else until he finished that manuscript. But it's chipping away at it every single day. I think a lot of students, you're going to run into a situation where you are looking for 3-hour block of time, and you're going to put off working on a project until you get that 3-hour block of time, and it won't happen. You'll never find that. And so work on it when you can. Even if it's an hour in the morning or 2 hours in the morning or an hour in the evening, just keep working on it, chipping away. So that persistence was the best advice I got.
So in that line, and I think that was like there's a home for every manuscript. And maybe in your experience, can you share a little bit of like what strategy have you approached when maybe you had a paper that it's 2 or your 3rd rejection? How do you then go back to the paper and kind of like, okay, maybe I should change this, or should I change the paper? Should I aim to a different journal? Kind of like how do you go through that?
I think a lot of it depends upon the feedback that you're getting. If it's a good fit for some of the journals your target journals that you're publishing in, hopefully the manuscript's improving after every review. So I do think it's important that even after a rejection, you go ahead and revise it as if it's an R&R. Now, you don't have to respond to all the specific reviewer comments, but the big ones, because reviewers are going to pick up on it, the same issues at the next journal. So there's one strategy. The second thing, if it's clear that there's a flaw in the design, at that point you have to decide, do I need to collect additional data and supplement it? And that's where you can, if it's a good project and you believe in it, then go forward and go ahead and collect some additional data, and then you have to pause sort of the review process and then go to another journal. But I think those are 2 of the strategies that I use. But paying attention to those reviewers it's so easy to read a set of reviews and say, well, that reviewer is completely wrong, or they're way off target, or they misunderstood. Yes, they may be wrong, but you have miscommunicated to them if they've come to the wrong conclusions. So the important thing is to use that feedback and make changes to the manuscript and improve the writing, the communication.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So on terms also kind of like of advice, and is there a resource that you would like to share, maybe that has been super helpful for you, or that you've seen that has been helpful for your students? And that could be maybe a conference, a workshop, a paper that you say, like, this paper should be read by every student, because I don't know, is there something that you think like a good resource that especially young PhD students could be helpful for them?
Well, I think the best resource for PhD students is Karma and the videos they provide. They've done a fantastic job of putting them in front of experts for all the different analyses and design features that they're going to encounter. And although I teach the methods course to our Ph.D., there are others who know some of those designs and analysis much better than me. So, the fact that Karma has put them in front of the students is a very valuable resource. And then the other ones are the classics, the Cohen, West and Aiken book that I use frequently on regression. I use it as a resource when I get stuck. Some analysis. The MU10s have done a really good job with their M+ discussion board in explaining how to do some analysis, interpret results. And for design issues, it's the Shadish, Cook, and Campbell textbook. So those are some of the best resources, I think, for analysis and design.
Perfect. So our last section is a fun game, a little game.
Yeah.
So we have here, it's like 30 cards, right?
Yeah.
And all these cards, each one has a different question.
Yes.
So it's like a random pick. It's and these questions were sourced from a survey we sent out to our NDSE participants, asking, hey, if you could ask anything to a professor or faculty, what this would be. These are very friendly questions.
Yes.
And nothing to worry about. So, but it's completely random. So I'm showing Bryan like 30 in front, and he can pick.
I'll pick a card at random.
Yes. Let's see. You can read that one. Let's see.
So this one is share a bit of your job market experience.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, of my own experience, or as when I was on the job market, because that was 20 years ago.
It's okay. I think. Yeah.
So I think it's preparation. So the experience some of the advice that I got, I had Dr. Stephanie Payne gave me questions that I should ask on my interviews, on my on-campus interviews, and I thought it was so fascinating because there were questions that you ask the person who picks you up from the airport and drives you to the hotel. It's questions you ask people, the staff at the hotel. It's questions that you ask the dean, the department head, the faculty, the students. I mean, it was so comprehensive, and I prepared all. So I always had questions to ask, and you're there interviewing for a day, sometimes 2 days, and they can get redundant over and over and over. And so I would also, so as long as if you're prepared, you can always ask something unique and get some unique information, and you're always prepared with questions. I would say, you want to pay attention to how you treat everybody, the administrative assistant, the person at the hotel lobby desk. When we interviewed at Oklahoma State, the realtor gives us feedback on what was said. So you want to be very careful about the whole thing is a job interview, no matter who you're talking with. And so I think that was an experience that I don't think I learned until I was on the job market. Like, you're not taught that during the Ph.D. program.
That's really good. I mean, I think even now that I'm thinking, when I did my interviews, I was like, oh, did I do everything right?
Yes.
Right. So just to finish, Bryan, and you're a program coordinator, what should be someone that is considering a PhD thinking on, like when they're in this mindset, should I go for a PhD? Okay, I'm going for a PhD. When they're thinking about where to apply, what should they be considering when they're doing this process?
That's an excellent question, and I think there's no one thing that you consider. I mean, the most obvious thing is to think carefully about your research interest and be able to articulate that. I don't think you have to know specifically what you want to do. So, for instance, you don't have to go in and say, well, I'm going to study personality testing in selection. It can be more broad, like selection and testing, but you want or training, but you want to give some examples. And from that perspective, you want to talk a little bit more like an academic. So you want to pull some articles, and particularly from faculty where you are going to apply. Look for faculty that are conducting research in the area that you want, and you have to make a decision as to whether or not you want to do OB or strategy. I don't think it's a disqualifier if you don't pick one or another. but it does help to articulate some of the research questions that you're interested in, because we have to know that you are interested in research, because it's a research degree, and it is, it's a huge commitment of time for both the student and the faculty. So we need them to have some passion for some research. And so that's part of it. And then I think who's there and who's publishing regularly. So you need, your job is going to be dependent upon your publication record. And your publication record is going to be reflected by the activity of the faculty on staff. So if they are regularly active and publishing, one or two things per year, you're in good shape. So you want to pay attention to that, and look at their vitas. So
I think that one is critical, that last one. Perfect, Bryan. I don't want to take more of your time. I really appreciate you taking some time. We're at AOM. Oh, well, maybe because we're at AOM, any kind of recommendations for first-year PhD students that are coming to a conference, maybe AOM, anything that you would recommend for your first-timers?
Yes. You have a lot of sessions to choose from, and I think some of the best in our field are doing round tables, some panels, and all the consortiums. So the early doc student consortium, the late doc student consortium. You want to go to as many of those as you can, because that's where you're going to get advice like I'm giving you right here on this podcast. And you get to ask questions, and it's interactive, and you learn a lot. I think that's also important, particularly the consortiums, because those are going to be your colleagues 10 years from now. And they're going to be the one, if you make some of my closest friends were from when I was a doc student at Texas A&M, and then I met them at universities all over the country. And because as a PhD student, you kind of hang out together in the evenings, and at night, you kind of attract to one another and work with each other. So those are going to be your collaborators in 10 years. They're going to be the journal editors in 10 years, and they're going to be in the leadership at AOM. And so you'll be connected. That's going to be your strongest network.
I think that's pretty good advice for AOM. Well, perfect. Thanks again, Bryan, and thanks everybody for hearing us. Thanks for joining me, and please stay in the loop for our next episode. I really hope everything we share here contributes to a happy and better PhD journey for you.